Hello, everyone. I'm just getting this sorted out. So, okay, there we go. There we go. There's always a few technical hurdles to kind of jump over or jump through before anything gets started. So, and I've got to get a couple of screens open and whatever. So hopefully all is well and you can see me and hello. So I usually kind of give it a minute or two, and I did start a little bit late just because I was kind of working through those, excuse me, those technical issues. So I'm gonna give it just another couple of minutes. Okay, hopefully, Sophia, hopefully that you've gotten on. I'm kind of looking over here at the comments. Hopefully you've gotten on and you can see me. Probably the reason why there wasn't anything was because I wasn't broadcasting yet. So I am broadcasting now. I'm gonna give it just another minute or so, just to make sure that everybody's gotten on, or anybody who wants to. There'll be people kind of coming and going through the whole thing. So, so I'll give it another minute, and I'll just take a second just to say thank you to everybody who is who took the time out or who's taking the time out to jump on to this. I really appreciate it. My goal with these things is to kind of make them more of a conversation. And so if it's just me hanging out, then it's not so much of a conversation. So, so thank you to anybody who's jumped on this. I really appreciate it. There's lots of people, just because this is being broadcast kind of all over the world, there's lots of people who can't, who can't get on because of the time difference. And when I do these things, I try to set them. I've done them on a Friday, and I've done them on it's Monday for me. For many of you, it's Sunday. So I've done them on a Friday, I've done them on a Monday. And I try to make them at different times so that at least at some point you could perhaps make one of the live ones. So I'm only going to just take another minute or so, take a sip of water, and then we will jump in, because there's a lot to cover. There's a lot to talk about, and really these half-an-hour chats are just a way of kind of giving you a little bit of a bite of things, or giving you just a little bit of food for thought. So let me just take some water. It's early. It's 7:30 in the morning here, so I've been up for a little bit, but not that long. I think this is the first talking I'm actually doing. All right, so let's jump into this subject. So what we're talking about today is the connection between yoga and Ayurveda. And this is something that it seems like a lot of people are really interested in knowing about. And it's it's a kind of an interesting intertwined subject. And so sometimes it can be a little bit confusing to kind of talk about. But what I do want you to know is that the more you know about Ayurveda, and the more you dive into Ayurveda, and the more you start to practice and create your own experience of Ayurveda, the more you will understand the connection between Ayurveda and yoga. And also the more you will understand the connection between your Ayurveda and your yoga. And that's probably the most important thing. So I'm going to talk kind of at a high level and try to give you some kind of an overview of this connection of yoga and Ayurveda today in this time. And so what I'll tell you is, if you have any questions right now, I can see the comments from the Facebook post. So if you have any questions while I'm talking, I can see them. So I will be happy to answer those if I can in the conversation, which is kind of the way it's supposed to work. So let's just talk about this. As I said, it's a really huge, big subject. I've got notes here because I want to keep myself focused, because otherwise I'll go all over the place. So you probably already know that yoga and Ayurveda kind of have the same historical and philosophical background. So that's a really easy bit of information to kind of tick off. But at a very high level, Ayurveda, we can kind of say that Ayurveda supports the goals or the main aims of yoga. So what are the goals and the main aims of yoga? And I'll dive into this a little more, because this is going to be the foundation of our talk today. So both Ayurveda and yoga, for both of them really, given that Ayurveda supports the main aims of yoga, the main aims of yoga, if we want to talk about it, are the four aims of life. And I don't know if you've heard these before: Dharma, Ardha, Kama, and Moksha. And I'll go into these in a little bit more detail and talk a little bit about how Ayurveda supports these things. Dharma is your path, or the actions that you take on a daily basis. Ardha are the things that you need. So whether that be clothes on your back, or food, or whether that be knowledge. Kama is pleasure, is kind of fulfillment of your desires. And then moksha, which is the ultimate goal of yoga, and thereby the ultimate goal of Ayurveda, which is liberation. And so we'll kind of dive into a little bit of that. Liberation from suffering, liberation from I want to say liberation from being kind of a slave to the ego, and kind of in a more practical and worldly sense, I kind of like to think of it as liberation from stress. And we experience stress on so many different levels, mind, body, spirit, almost constantly. And so even just the idea, I'm like kind of relaxing into this idea that this liberation from stress is something to really aspire to, really. So that's it. That's the ultimate goal of yoga, is moksha, this liberation, and thereby it's the ultimate goal of Ayurveda. And so how do we actually get there? How do we get to this moksha? How do we get to this liberation? Well, Patanjali says that yoga, chitta vritti nirodha. So yoga calms the fluctuations of the mind. And so in the yogic world, the way that we get to this moksha, the way that we get to this liberation, is by calming all of the turmoil that's happening in the mind, right? And so we do that in a lot of different ways. It's not just by ultimately it is by meditation, but there's an understanding that in order to get to that place, in order to get to the place of being able just to sit and to meditate and to clear the mind, you got to have a whole lot of other stuff going on. You got to have a whole lot of other things in place. And that's where the yamas and the niyamas, and I don't know if you've heard of these things, but that's where these guidelines for how to live properly, and how to live. And again, I'm going to keep coming back to this idea of stress. So how to live in a way that's free of stress, how to live in a way that is that creates a level of harmony with your environment, how to live in a way that is authentically you. So there isn't any internal stress or any internal struggle or turmoil as well. And so once we have all of these things in place, and we're healthy and we're fit, basically in the mind and the body, that gives us the ability to sit. That gives us the ability to go inward and to sit and to perhaps more easily clear all of these things that are normally going on in our minds, so that we can actually achieve that liberation. So you can maybe even start to get a sense for where Ayurveda plays in there, because the goal of Ayurveda, outside of moksha, dharma, artha, kama, blah, 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 outside of all of that, is to create that harmony, right? Is to create that that harmony between what's going on in your mind and your body and the outside world and your soul. And it does that in a number of different ways. And it's also the aim of Ayurveda really is to help us to free us from any disease. Because you can imagine, if your body or your mind are suffering from some level of disease, then you are going to be very, very challenged in experiencing or even in creating or getting to your ultimate experience of yoga or moksha. So Ayurveda is here to support us in mind and body, so that we can actually live and practice and experience those goals or those aims of yoga. And that, at the simplest level, that's kind of it. But what starts to look like, and I think somewhere in one of the posts in the group, I've actually put in there a picture that looks like it's an M.C. Escher painting, because it's kind of this infinity. It's like this kind of nonstop connection loop, because Ayurveda will support the aims of yoga, but then yoga some of the, if you consider the 8 limbs of yoga, asana, pranayama, yamas, niyamas, all of the rest of it, yoga actually supports the aims of Ayurveda. So it's this kind of infinite loop. And that's where it can start to get confusing. So as long as you just know, or as long as you're just aware of the fact that they both support each other in this kind of interconnected way. And that is why you'll often hear things, and I'll say that as well. I've heard Deepak Chopra say it, and lots of other Ayurvedic and yogic scholars say that Ayurveda and yoga are really 2 sides of the same coin, right? We're heading in the same direction. Hi. And someone just said hi. We're heading in the same direction, and we've just got we've got 2 different things that are actually 2 different sciences, or 2 different. They're really kind of the same approach, but they're both kind of helping us to get there. So let's just dive into a little bit. I'm just going to talk through each one of those 4 aims and kind of talk to you a little bit about how Ayurveda helps us, because a lot of you are yogis, and so a lot of you have some experience or practice with yoga, and so I want to kind of give you a little bit more of the Ayurvedic side of things. And I've also got to make sure that I'm paying attention to the time, because I can really talk forever. So let's just talk a little bit about Dharma. Dharma, and you may have heard the term Dharma. That's the beauty of kind of some of the Sanskrit terms, is that they can mean lots of different things. But for the purposes of this conversation, Dharma really refers to the actions that you take and that you engage in your life. You might call it your path. I've heard people say your career. So how does Ayurveda support you in living out your Dharma? Well, Ayurveda, in many ways, is this beautiful set of guidelines that helps you to understand the impacts of the world around you. And by that, I just mean the impacts of the cycles of nature, the seasons, the weather, the impacts of all of the different things that you choose to have in your life, the food, the exercise, the lifestyle, all of those different things. And in many ways, you can consider that those things, your choices for any of those things, are a big part of the actions that you're taking. They're a big part of your Dharma. And so what Ayurveda tries to do is give you some deep insights into your personal story, your personal nature, and how that nature, whether it's Vata, Pitta, or Kapha, or any combination of those, is going to interact with the world around you. And so it's how that, and I'll give you an example. I talk about this all the time. You guys are eventually going to know a lot about my interactions with the world. But Vata, Pitta, that's me. And so cold is a really big issue for me. And so in experiencing and learning about Ayurveda, I have gotten a sense for all the many ways that being in the cold, or being cold, or cold climates, or, et cetera, affect me, mind and body. And so with that information, with that knowledge, I'm able to make far more powerful and more well-informed choices about where I go and what I do and the foods that I eat and the clothes that I wear, so that I can actually maintain a mind-body harmony with the world around me, instead of being anxious or aggravated or angry when I'm in environments that really tip me the wrong way. And so in that way, Ayurveda informs my actions. It informs my choices. It supports me living out my Dharma, because living my Dharma really is about, for me, it's about being the happiest, healthiest, and healthiest expression of me as a Vata Pitta as possible. And so that comes from finding that balance. So that's Dharma. Ardha. So Ardha, sorry, the voice is going. Ardha, again, it can be talked about in lots of different ways, but for the purposes of this conversation, Ardha refers to the things that we need around us, the things that we need around us to help us on our way. And for many people at the simplest level, that's things like your home, or your if you have a car, if you need a car, maybe not, your home, your food, your furniture. Sometimes it can be referred to as your worldly possessions, but it can also be referred to as the knowledge that you need in order to carry out the things that you need to carry out on a daily basis. So it's not only the tools, it's kind of like your tools. So how does Ayurveda support us there? Well, very similar to Dharma, Ayurveda gives us enough information about who we are internally and how that can relate to the choices that we make for things like where we live or the home we kind of live in and what we can do. And there's a whole level of Ayurveda that a lot of people have not even heard of that's similar to Feng Shui, which is called Vastu, and I won't get really into that. But what I'm really trying to illustrate is that Ayurveda advises us on many, many different levels in our lives. So just in terms of, Ardha and those having the comfort and the knowledge, Ayurveda provides us with that underlying knowledge about the kinds of foods that we should be eating, or the kinds of things that we should be thinking about, or the kinds of issues that are going to most likely rattle us or kind of throw us off of our game. So again, Ayurveda kind of feeds into our own internal knowledge, our own internal experience. And so the more, as well as that, Ayurveda really does advise us on knowing more about ourselves. And so the more that we know about ourselves, the better we're positioned to make these choices about the sorts of things that we actually have around us. And really, the better we're positioned to get a sense for what kinds of things or what levels of things represent a healthy balance or represent an unhealthy balance. So an example might be that most of us really, we crave comfort in our lives. And so for me, at least, when I first heard about these 4 aims of life, how excited was I to know that one of the aims in life was to have some level of comfort, to have some level of sort of, I don't want to say worldly wealth, because that's not really it, but, to have things, to have some level of, it feels like all the things that we do day in and day out are really to live a healthy and happy and comfortable life. And sometimes you can feel a little bit guilty when you think, well, the ultimate aim is not to worry about any of this stuff. But Ayurveda and yoga understand that having these things or having these sort of things and these comforts in our lives, they're part of getting to that place. So in doing that, we kind of, as a society and a culture, kind of tended to hang out a lot in this space of kind of wanting comfort around us, whether it's food or whether it's things, cars or vacations or big houses or whatever. And so Ayurveda starts to give us a little bit of an understanding of what aspects of our desires are healthy and can create a sort of a level of balance. In other words, they're just what we need. And what aspects of our desires are unhealthy and imbalanced. And often if we've got an imbalance of, say, kapha, we tend to kind of want to have a lot of things around us. And we start to get an understanding of what causes those imbalances of kapha. And so from Ayurveda, and so that we can actually start to balance that out. I hope that makes some kind of sense. So I've got kind of rambling a little bit there, but just trying to give you an understanding of how Ayurveda can help us to better achieve a healthy balance of Ardha. So then we go to Kama, and Kama is pleasure. It's pleasure. And so again, there's lots of different ways that we can think about this, and there's lots of different ways. Yes, you're Kapha Vata, more Kapha. Yes, Kapha, the beautiful thing about the doshas is they've all got gorgeous and wonderful expressions, and that our goal and our task really is to understand what's a healthy expression and what's a not so healthy expression, and then kind of do what we need to do to kind of bring ourselves back into that healthy expression place. So anyway, just getting back to Kama. Sally Kempton, a beautiful, beautiful yoga teacher and yogi, says that to practice Kama yogically, it means to practice being fully present with whatever it is that you're experiencing. And I love that about karma because I think that really encapsulates the idea. Because when we think about karma and pleasure, we think about all kinds of different things. Some people might think about food, or some people might think about, receiving things, or some people might think about experiencing time with their friends or family or various other things. But when you keep it, when you take it and keep it really, really simple, karma is really about being present. And so Ayurveda teaches us that is so very important. And not only that, but Ayurveda also teaches us to understand those things that truly feed us. So once we can understand those things that truly feed us, whether that is experiences or people, or even just, standing on the beach and just feeling the wind blow through your hair or across your face, you can start to choose these experiences. And mind you, you can be present in any experience, really. But once you really start to understand those things that feed you, in my view, you can start to kind of really boost that experience of karma and of pleasure. So not only that, but Ayurveda also teaches us, just in terms of the kind of things that we do on a daily basis, it teaches us to have some level of intention behind those things, and as a result, to find the presence within those things. So perfect example is eating our meals. And most of us, when we're eating, we're often doing about 5 other things, or we're thinking about a bunch of different things. And so Ayurveda really wants to teach us, even, not only just with eating, but eating's a great example. Ayurveda wants to teach us to be present in that experience, to experience the way that the things that we do, the food that we eat, actually feeds our bodies, and also to experience the way that the things that we do and the foods that we eat and the people that we're around, etc., can maybe tend to sabotage. So presence gives us a lot of things. It can give us that experience of joy. It can give us that karma. And I think when it's really working, when it's working, it gives us awareness. But presence can give us that experience, but it can also give us that level of awareness of the things that we should be staying away from. And in doing that, it puts us more squarely on the path to enjoyment, on the path to experiencing that karma. I think I had a question. Oh, the link is spinning. Oh. Uh-oh, I hope that's coming back. This is being recorded, so if at any point it kind of drops in or out, you will have the opportunity to watch it back at some point. And I'm just wanting to check the time, because as I said, I can talk forever. And I just want to make sure that I keep it pretty tight. This is while I'm just pausing here, this is a great time. If anybody has any questions, hopefully the link isn't still spinning. If anybody has any questions about any of the stuff that I've been talking about so far, I'd be happy to answer them. I know sometimes if I'm talking, people don't want to kind of jump in and ask questions. Okay, so I see, yeah, I don't know, Vesman, I'm not sure if you're just laughing along with me or what. It looks like you may be, but I did get that. Hopefully the link isn't still spinning. So the last one that I want to kind of talk a little bit about is moksha, that ultimate experience. And then if I have a couple more minutes, I will dive into, 2 minutes left. Okay, great. Last thing I want to talk about, thank you, Sophia, is moksha. Moksha is the ultimate, right? Moksha is this freedom from and freedom to. Freedom from suffering, freedom from whatever it is that's blocking us from realizing our own power. And then also it's freedom to, and this is the bit that I love the most, because it's freedom to be who we are. And what I believe that Ayurveda gives or speaks, and the way that I believe Ayurveda really speaks to this, is that in understanding our true nature, in understanding our doshas, and in understanding our relationship with all of the different things around us, whether that be the seasons or the foods that we eat or the people that we spend our time with, we start to get a deeper understanding of who we are. And when we do that, it gives us the freedom to actually be who we are. When we know that, when I know that the cold drives me nuts and I really don't, and it makes me, feel terrible or whatever, I start to understand myself a little bit more. I start to understand my reactions as opposed to just considering that I'm just this kind of freak person who's going to be quiet even though I'm feeling really anxious when it's cold. I start to be able to make the choices like, hey guys, let's come inside, or you know what, I'm going to wear that coat. I mean, these are super, super simple examples. But when you understand really who you are and the way that all these different things, impact you, you can step fully into who you are, and you can start making far more powerful choices about all of the things in your life, whether it's the food that you eat. You eat whatever, chocolate cake because it feeds you. You eat broccoli because it feeds your soul at this time of the year. Whatever it is, you can really start to own these things. And when you do that, that gives you that freedom. It gives you that freedom to be who you are. And it also gives you that freedom from everything else. From your own ego telling you that you're wrong, or that you're not good enough, or whatever it is, because you're not the same as everyone else. So to me, that is one way for me personally that Ayurveda has actually supported that moksha. And not only that, but I'd like to think that, in supporting my yoga, my practice of yoga, Ayurveda is also supporting that eventual, that complete freedom from the ego. So, really? I'm sorry, I'm just reading Sophia's comment. Yeah, that's great. That's wonderful. And you know what? What's interesting is that person is probably in some little or big way actually practicing Ayurveda. They just really don't know it. And that's why I'm here, because I want people to kind of understand these connections. And then once they go, oh, I have actually just been practicing the threads of Ayurveda, then you can open up the treasure box and really dive in. And then once you do that, your yoga and your Ayurveda just build on each other, and your experience of life and living and people and every little thing you do, from the most mundane thing to the most absolutely divine thing, just start to feel and be so much more powerful, because they feel like they're coming from you. They feel like they are fitting you in some way that, oh, good. So that's kind of my high level, living your yoga with Ayurveda, living your Ayurveda with yoga. Now, at some point in the future, we'll have another conversation, because people are like, wait a minute, like, what kind of yoga poses do I do then with this Ayurveda thing? We can dive right on into, how Ayurveda can impact or can inform your daily practice of yoga. And for many people, the daily practice of yoga is things like, or I suppose I should say, are things like your asana practice and your meditation. And there's a whole another conversation that we can have around that, and around what yoga poses you should be doing when, and how to determine that, and around what types of meditation may work for you depending upon your dosha and your true nature and what's going on in the world around you. Today is not the day for that conversation, but we will have that conversation. So I did just want to let you know that that's still something that's still a whole other conversation. And as I mentioned, it's a huge subject. And so there's a lot to talk about. So we're just getting started, folks. So what I normally do is I leave this thing going for just a couple more minutes. It's 3 minutes after 8, so I've pushed past my half an hour, but I got in a little bit late. So if you do have any questions, I am happy to answer them live now for another couple of minutes. Otherwise, I'm going to leave this link up so that people can watch this conversation. And if you have any questions, like you maybe think of something, later on today, just pop them into the comments. I will see them. I will answer them. So yeah, I'll just hang out here. I'll have a look at the comments, and I'll answer a question or two if they come up. But otherwise, thank you all for showing up for this. I really, really appreciate you being around, and I do believe that, communities feed us in so very many ways. Oh wait, we have a question coming. Does it take time to learn how to continually make those choices that support us, especially when we say yes? In a word, yes, it does take time. And the interesting thing is, when we embrace from the outset that it will take time, all of a sudden it makes the whole process that little bit easier, because you understand that it isn't something that you should learn and know tomorrow. It's something that is a practice. It's something that you're gonna learn. And as every new thing comes into your your sphere of experience, you're going to have to learn with the knowledge that you've got how to manage those things. And then the more you will learn it as well, that there's a lot of, and I talked about this last time too, a lot of things just happen kind of over and over again, and we don't always see it that way. But the more we start to understand ourselves and our bodies and the way that our bodies react to things, we start to feel these feelings, we start to become aware of them, we realize, oh, that's right, this is familiar. And then you go, all right, well, if this is familiar, this is how I dealt with this last time. So in a word, yes, it does take time to continually learn. But if we approach these things with intention and with our eyes open, and that's often the issue, I think, for a lot of us, we approach things really with our eyes closed. And a perfect example for that might be things like, you start off at the beginning of the year, and you've got this diet you're going to do, and you've got this exercise routine, and you've got all these, you're building up all these great big things, and you're going to change your life totally. And often we just dive on into that, and within, I don't know, month, 2 months, it's all gone. Part of the reason for that is because we don't take the time at the very beginning to thank you, Sophia. We don't take the time at the very beginning to really open our eyes to who we are. Like, what's the likelihood I'm going to drop off of this? Or what sort of things, what kinds of thoughts or experiences are going to pull me away from this intention? And I think it's important to understand those sorts of things, or to get, yes, okay, that's a whole nother conversation, Mule, that the doshas. And I'll give you some places to kind of, I'll answer that in just a second. Let me just finish this one really quick, sorry. So I believe that we need to have a sense for who we are and what things stop us and what things feed us and all that sort of stuff before we jump into anything. Because when we can do that with our eyes open, then our chances of kind of staying with things, or at least seeing the areas that we fall down in a bit better perspective are far better. So we had a question about what are the doshas. That is a really big question, and this isn't necessarily the forum to talk about that, just because I could go on for at least another hour to 2 hours to talk about the doshas. In a nutshell, the doshas are these functional energies that basically work together, interact together to define everything about us, including the way we look, the way we think, the way we walk, the choices that we make in our lives. And each one of us has our own very unique combination of those things. So in order to answer that question a little bit better for you, I will provide a link and give you a place to go to kind of look into that a little bit more. And we talked about that. In fact, I did a talk about that a couple of weeks ago, so I'll give you a link to that. Thank you, Brianne, for coming. I really appreciate that. So this is where I'm going to wrap it up. If you guys have any other questions, pop them into the comments. I'll do another talk probably in another week and a half or so. We're coming into cleansing time in the year. Normally in Ayurveda, we cleanse a couple of times a year. It's the Ayurvedic way of building self-care into your life, and I love it. And so in spring and in fall, we tend to do an Ayurvedic cleanse. And I want to talk to you guys a little bit about that, because often when we think about cleansing, we think, oh, well, cleansing, I don't know if I really need cleansing. And there's so much behind our actual need for cleansing. And I want to illuminate some of those things for you guys. So I think our next talk might be a little bit about that. So again, thank you for jumping on this call today. And I'll put up some information about the next one. And if you do have any questions, you can go ahead and put those in. And again, one more quick thank you just for being a part of this community. So until our next talk, namaste.